Welcome to the Raising Cinephiles podcast, a show about passing on your love of cinema to the next generation. I'm your host, Jessica Kantor, and I have worked in all facets of the entertainment industry for the last 20 years, and recently became a mom. My guest today is Jordan Galland. He discusses how he discovered cinema and how his daughter became interested in his favorite film through a storybook. Always remember that myself and guests are speaking from personal experience and not giving parenting advice. Let's go ahead and dive into the episode. Welcome back to the Raising Cinephiles podcast. This is your host, Jessica Kantor, and I'm here with Jordan Galland, who is a filmmaker known for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Undead, Alter Egos, and Ava's Possessions. And we met at NYU in school just a few moons ago. I'm really excited to have you here, Jordan.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes. So first question, what is your first movie memory?
The first time I remember being in a movie theater, watching a movie, it was, I remember actually being taken out of the movie theater because I was crying. I think my mom brought me to see Benji when I was like 2.5. So I was pretty young. I was with my grandmother. And I remember both of them. And I remember, well, first of all, I started crying naturally because some bird came down and took Benji's mother away. some horrible animal struggle in nature. And I just cried. And then I remember the blinding sunlight outside, and my mom took me out. And so that was one of them. And I also remember that was my first memory with my mom, but I also remember my first memory with my dad. And he brought me to see Ghostbusters when I was 4 with a French friend of his, another French doctor. And I remember that they were laughing when the ghost first comes out in the library, that famous first scene. And I felt so betrayed by their laughter because I was like, this is a scary movie. You've taken me to a scary movie with ghosts and you're laughing about it too. So that was another shock to the system.
That film must have had a big impression on you, though, because you tell funny horror movies.
I know. I really think it was a first sort of experience of of genre mixing, as a human, not even just it's because I was so terrified of having nightmares. I think a lot of kids are really scared of having nightmares. They're not necessarily scared of the movie so much as scared of how it will affect their sleep. And I remember having those discussions as a 4-year-old with other kids. Yeah, you can't see Gremlins, so-and-so down the block watched Gremlins and has had nightmares for 2 months. Was the way you would judge if a movie could be watched. If it gave you nightmares for 2 months, that was a bad move.
I don't remember having those conversations, but I don't also think my parents let me see movies that gave me nightmares because they were strategic sleepers.
All right, that's another way to go.
So you have a good movie memory experience?
I mean, so it's interesting. It's all these emotional reactions. I remember seeing E.T. with 2 friends around the same age, whatever year these movies came out. You were little, and my friends' parents brought me. And afterwards, they were crying unconsolably. And I couldn't understand why. It was so strange. I'm so we just saw an alien. It was clearly not real. What are they crying? And then I remember the parents being annoyed at me for not crying. They weren't my parents. They were you should be crying too. It was an emotional movie. The first movie experience that excited me as a kid was probably The Dark Crystal. And again, I don't remember what year that came out, but that was just such a cool, magical thing. I didn't know how it was made. I couldn't understand because the puppets didn't look like real puppets. Couldn't see the hand inside the sock. And it felt like a serious movie. It wasn't treating the subject matter of myths and legends and magic or even the puppet. It wasn't even treating the puppets like it was for children. It was so well crafted and serious. And the music was cinematic, serious compositions.
So after seeing that film, did you watch it again?
Yeah. The exciting part about being a kid back then in the early 80s was that you had to time it right. So The Dark Crystal was on HBO, probably on rotation. And HBO was this like very special channel. It showed Fraggle Rock. So I knew at HBO was pretty young. My dad called it home box office. Let's turn on home box office. I'm like, what does that mean? I had this like serious name, and so I would have to you have to wait and make sure that you could be ready for when The Dark Crystal started. But yeah, I watched it several times, and then there was VHS tapes, which made things more accessible on demand style.
The first two memories, you were quite young, you were with your parents. Did you find that when you started to get into films, you were watching them alone, or was it a family activity?
It was a bit of both. I think that there was a time, I had older brothers, 13 years older. So there was a real period of time where I wasn't allowed to watch what they were watching. But this sort of goes into what excited me about films, which was the forbidden quality to it. I would sneak out and hide behind the couch as my older brothers watched like Deer Hunter and The Godfather. And if they saw me, they would freak out as if I was like holding a dead animal in my hands. Like, get out of here. Like, really. And I realized they were scared that it would imprint on me or that my parents would be upset at them or something. But that was exciting and dangerous to watch those movies. But yeah, I remember my brother coming home with a VHS of Labyrinth, the David Bowie, Jennifer Connelly movie. And like, it was just sort of presented to me as this thing of like, this will shut you up. And like, you'll enjoy this and you'll be happy and you won't bother me. Maybe he was like babysitting me and my parents were away. So yeah, I did a lot of watching movies alone because, especially at home, it wasn't until I was like 12 or 13 that I would then go to the theater alone.
Yeah, I was also a high schooler. I didn't move to Manhattan until I was 12, 13, but I found that I went to the movies a lot. It was like a thing to just go with friends.
It's one of the fortunate things about being in, yes, you could do it in the suburbs as well, but you need a car. So you need someone to drive you. But in the city, you could just go. And especially, I don't know what it's like now, but I just remember buying one ticket to see like My Cousin Vinny, but then just sneaking into Basic Instinct and then sneaking into Thelma and Louise and having a whole day of adult adventure.
I did some of that sneaking, and then they cracked down, I felt like, at a certain point.
Yeah, I think the point at which tickets became like they introduced credit cards or something. There was a point at which it was kind of getting on the subway. You used to be able to just, I don't know, the different things. Like when it was tokens, you could like put a penny in and trick the machine. But once the technology changed, it was sort of
harder to game the system.
Yeah, harder to game the system, exactly.
And when did you know film was a craft?
It's a good question. I think I experienced various levels of it being a craft. When I was a kid, my family had a kind of home. They didn't have film, but they had like a home camcorder scenario. And that fascinated me. So I would film myself. And then my dad got me some editing equipment. But the editing equipment was so slow because it would rewind. You'd have to plug in the numbers and it would scan the tape and rewind back to the number that you wanted. And so it was very hard to watch through your edit in any satisfying way if you were 8 or 9 years old. So I didn't follow through with that. And part of that made it seem a little bit like, oh, this is going to be, to make something that like is edited, it's going to be tricky. So didn't really get into that until high school when they had classes and facilities and people were doing that. I know I developed an obsession with The Godfather when I was 11 or 12 and Clockwork Orange, which were movies that I rented when I was alone with my grandmother because you needed an adult to rent them, but she didn't know what I was doing. My parents were away. And I watched those movies and I developed an obsession with them. And like, I'd heard my family talk about them. And they weren't going to let me watch them. And then I understood that there was like a director behind them. And Francis Ford Coppola and Stanley Kubrick were like the first. It was like Michelangelo or like Leonardo da Vinci. Like those are the first people I was like, oh, they made the movies. Somehow they're responsible. And what I love about the movie is somehow coming from them. I love the actors in the movies too. And obviously they seemed very much responsible for what I was enjoying as well. And I also read the books. I also got really into I wrote a book report for Clockwork Orange in 6th grade. The teacher was like, what the hell? So I was definitely like into the layers of filmmaking. Where does it come from? And how do all these different factors come together to create this experience of watching the movie? It's not necessarily the same as a song where you could see somebody playing and singing it and that was it. There was a deeper path to the way the movie got made.
Yeah. And as a musician also, which I didn't put in your intro, and I remember your music also tells stories. So I'm curious about that impulse of telling stories, and you write most of your films. When do you think that impulse to tell stories came?
I was always really fascinated by all forms of storytelling and attempted very unsuccessfully, very young, to try and write a novel. And I showed it to my dad and he like laughed and was like, this is not a novel. This isn't even possible that people would fly from Russia to the US in an afternoon, and none of this stuff makes any sense. And I remember just thinking like, damn, like when I was writing it, I thought it was the next James Bond. These moments in childhood where you're just like, I'm gonna try this. I can do this. I remember writing a lot of plays, which was somehow a more simpler form. And so it was slightly more acceptable because there's not a lot of illusion. I guess I would write plays and that seemed to the adults that I showed it to more acceptable than if I tried to write a novel and it was like 20 pages long and it made no sense. And music is just the tradition of that sort of storytelling. The Beatles do that a lot, like Maxwell's Silver Hammer, songs that tell sort of narratives. Bob Dylan did a lot of that. So I was exposed to that pretty young.
In an earlier conversation, Yellow Submarine came up as a film going from music and storytelling. And I'm curious if those types of films resonated with you.
It was funny. I didn't actually have much. To this day, I don't think I've watched Yellow Submarine in its entirety. I was much more interested in or exposed to the Jim Henson stuff that was coming along. Like I said, Fraggle Rock and Dark Crystal. And I don't remember, even like Charlie Brown seemed a little too unimaginative for me as a kid. I liked, not that Yellow Submarine isn't imaginative, obviously it is, but I think it was a little too confusing to me too that the band was doing a cartoon. Like it was just changing lanes. Sometimes if you're a kid, you could be a little OCD about stuff. Like my daughter hates it when normal food like pasta is a little too sweet because she's like, it's not dessert. And so thing I watched, I don't know, but I can imagine like someone trying to show me Yellow Submarine and I'd be like, yeah, but this is a cartoon. This is not, a band shouldn't be making a cartoon. They should be making music.
Yeah.
That is like,
she's joining the conversation. So you're not going to serve your daughter rice pudding.
Yeah. Or like even apparently I can't serve her sweet ricotta pasta. She's like, sorry, this is dessert. And then I would say, we can eat it for dessert. But she wants something really sweet for dessert. So the stuff in between.
Yeah, a cannoli might be confusing too.
Totally confusing. It's like, it's this part pretzel.
So speaking of your daughter, have you watched a film with her yet?
Disney Channel was a really exciting thing as a parent to be like, whoa, there's access at my fingertips to like all of these things that I would love out of just sheer curiosity to revisit now. Because you watching an old Disney cartoon and they're beautifully drawn. The music's amazing. But she was just terrified by everything and not ready for it. So she's 4.5. We have conversations. We did watch a few things. I watched The Sword and the Stone with her. And then she understands that those clips of certain scenes are available like separately. So she's like, I want to see a clip of when they turn into squirrels and they're just really happy and it's not scary. That's what she wants to watch. She knows that she understands the difference between movies and shows as a form and kind of oscillates between what she prefers. But I've been trying to watch the old Robin Hood with her. And I even try to lure her. I'm like, there's a princess that's a fox. And when it comes on and she sees the rhinoceroses carrying spears, she shrieks like it's a mass murderer is coming for her, and she runs down the hall. So I'm still in this phase where I'm like trying to get her into it. What's fascinating is that she came to me recently because she found my old Dark Crystal book that was made as a storybook for kids. And we had left it in her room with her other books. And she said, Dada, why is your scary book with my not scary books? And I was like, oh, it's not really scary. And I started to talk to her about it and show her the pictures. And I'm a little bit snobby about this stuff. So I love that there's these beautiful illustrations inside, and they're like watercolor, and it's like really high level art on some level, at least illustratively. And she got so into it. And I read it to her twice in that day. And then the next day she brought it to breakfast. And so she's into the story. She knows that there's a movie. She only wanted to watch a clip of the Podlings because they're nice. But she's not ready for the movie yet. But I think that like books, like she'll get into the books first. And
that's great. Yeah. She's afraid of having nightmares.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what it is. I didn't want to introduce that language even in, but it's very hard. You notice with kids, you start to say like, oh, are you afraid of this? And they'll be like, they'll choose that. They'll say, oh yeah, I'm afraid. So I try not to even offer that as an option necessarily. Obviously, some things are scary. We tried to watch Finding Nemo with her when she was 2, and it's actually pretty scary at the beginning when the shark comes and like destroys the little fish world and fish die and whatever. I mean,
the other like interesting theme I'm learning is like going through these emotions and being there with your children to speak to them about what they're feeling, and that it's normal to have all of these feelings, and that they're kind of outside of themselves in a lot of ways because they're empathetic feelings. It's not happening to them. It's a really good learning opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a lot of ways in which we want to protect our children from any kind of negative experience. You don't really want them to cry ever. You're never like, oh, it's good that they're crying right now. But I mean, have to have those experiences, and they need them also, to be their own and not be totally refereed by their parents all the time. What's fascinating to me, though, is that for about a year, she would only watch the first 2 seasons of Peppa Pig, which isn't something I introduced her to, but she heard through other kids. And so that was all she would watch. And I bought the other seasons, and she wouldn't watch those. She only watched the ones she felt safe with. But there were episodes that she was scared of. And that baffled me, because I'm like, why are you scared of this thing that's the most gentle possible passive form of storytelling for a child? And it was because there was a dinosaur, but she wasn't scared of the dinosaur. She was scared because one of the characters was scared of the dinosaur. And she said that to me. She's like, no, because George thinks the dinosaur is real. That's why I don't want to watch that. The really empathetic, and that had never occurred to me before, that it could be that she's empathizing with a character who's scared, really experiencing it herself.
That's interesting. She knows her boundaries. Not take it on. I don't want to take it on, so I'm not going to watch that. Me. Yeah. Another family with a young girl around who's older now, but her first movie that really got her into movies was Frozen. I don't know if you want to go there because it is a journey to go through that music for a while. I
remember my friend's kids, like 6 or 7 years ago. I was staying with them in LA, and their guest room was like right next to the family room where the kid would wake up at 6 and just sing those songs. So I was terrified. Like, I was like, I just don't want. Of course, it's different when it's your kid and they're singing the songs. It's way cuter than it's someone else waking you up. But she won't watch Frozen. She'll watch Frozen 2 for some reason. And she likes Elsa. And I think that the story of sisters is cool compared to, there are things that are improved about these stories than as far as like the stereotypes are concerned. But yeah, it hasn't been a big problem for me yet. At least she hasn't been totally obsessed with it, and she hasn't been annoying me with the songs.
But she does like short form content and books, which is great.
Yeah,
Stories.
her mom, also named Jessica, read her so much since she was little. I have to give her credit for that. I mean, I read her a lot, but like Jessica read to her when clearly wouldn't even know what a book was. She was reading to her. That was something that was advice that a doctor gave us, like just read to her, even though, or whatever. I mean, that's all parenting advice, but seems to have paid off with Noelle because she really loves books. And obviously that is something you have a bit of like, feels good when your kid's looking at a book rather than a screen.
Even at 16 months, my son goes and picks out a book for me to read to him, and will have me read it to him over and over again. And have you taken your daughter to the theater, like movie theater or traditional theater?
No, we have not attempted the theater yet. She's aware that I do stuff in theater. She knows that her mom and I go to plays sometimes and leave her with grandma and grandpa. She knows that I play music in front of people, and she's aware of what the audience is. But I don't think there's that thing of like, it'd be stressful. We haven't even been on a plane with her. So it's that kind of like avoiding the public disruption of her melting down too much before she's ready. But I'm excited to take her to the theater one day. There's Film Forum Junior on Sunday mornings. They have stuff. But it's still, we got to wait till she's a little older, I think.
Yeah. And have you done any of the like Nutcracker or any of that type of thing?
She loves watching videos of the Nutcracker. She has watched every version of Mother Ginger's dance that exists, like across the world. If it's available on YouTube, she has watched it and made me make a playlist of just Mother Ginger dances. So to some degree, I'm like, if this can hold your attention this long, we could go and sit and watch it in person because
the Nutcracker. Yeah, the Nutcracker, especially you could do a matinee, all kids melting down. So it's like, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it amongst the crowd of welcoming.
Funny. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
I went here in LA with a friend. She got tickets to the Nutcracker, and I was a ballet dancer. So she was like, you come with me. And it was so fun watching the little kids in the theater reacting to it with such awe and not knowing how to behave the best way, you know? Oh,
right. And now that I'm thinking about it, we'll probably go, because she'll be 5 this Christmas. So that's like the age. That's the age where I really started to have strong memories of stuff myself. So I feel like 5 is when you're like, well, I'll remember this definitely, or most of it.
Yeah. And is there anything that you're excited to show her as she gets older?
As she grows older? Well, I'm really excited to show her in the next few years the Disney cartoons that she's scared of now. Although I know that there's some messaging in those, but I think that the artistry of it is incredible. And compared to the new cartoons, it just doesn't feel like they need to see that to understand the difference. The contrast between the old and the new. I'm really excited eventually for her to see things like Thelma and Louise, which were movies that I watched when I was sneaking into the theater. But I think that she has to discover it on her own in a similar way, but I wouldn't discourage it because I think that there's something just so exciting. And it is a safe space to experience something that's just could change or grow your perspective on the world. To see adult movies like that. I don't know what the future of movies is going to be like for her. It's not going to be sneaking in. There's not going to be movies like Thelma and Louise for her to sneak into. If there are, they're going to be on Netflix and she'll have access to that way before then, probably.
Yeah. She'll be hacking the parental controls.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what you're touching on, I think, is another really exciting thing is to be able to have conversations about bigger things in life that she'll be experiencing, especially as a teenager, through other characters rather than with the spotlight on herself. So what dating is, one early episode of this that I recorded that we used the show Riverdale as something she watches with her 11-year-old, which is a little early for that content, but they watch as a family and they discuss what these characters are going through and, is a parent a good parent and why? And I thought that was so interesting to use film as a tool like that.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I would even say to go back and watch My So-Called Life. I used to watch Dallas and Falcon Crest every Thursday, Friday night with my family as a kid. So it was actually that was a real fun thing. And I remember being into the serialized drama of it all. And it was a way of relating to my own life because I had these 3 older brothers and a kind of crazy backstory to my family that existed before I was born. And so seeing this soap opera on TV with them was almost a way of taking the spotlight off of us and then projecting it onto something else. Makes it kind of more fun. Yeah. Makes you think about it in a different way.
I love that you brought up My So-Called Life. That was one of my favorites. That I think we're the same age as Claire Danes. So she was playing a character that was my age, really dealing with, and one of the few to play her age in a teen show and dealing with the things we were dealing with while it was on screen.
It's so good. I've rewatched it. My wife also has a similar love for the show. And when we were living together, but not even engaged to be married, if we had that hangover or something, she'd want to put it on and we'd get sucked in. So I've rewatched it a bunch as an adult and it really holds up. That's why I'm saying you could go back and watch that with your kids when they're a little bit older.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's great. Certainly. It seems great for a girl too.
Yes. I'm going to ask you my final question, which is if I were to show my son a film, it can be when he's 2 or when he's 16, what film will make him love film?
I do think the age is different things happen at different times. As a teenager, I think Casablanca is always a great thing. I found myself very much loving black and white films when I was 12, 13, 14. And then I wanted movies more like True Romance when I was in my 16, 17, 18, more dangerous, more violent, more gritty. And as the sort of ability of the story of the filmmakers to show more graphic stuff. But then there's also, and those movies, I guess, because Casablanca, they're touchstones. True Romance is this movie that just has so much talent in it. And you watch it and it's got Tarantino writing and it's got Tony Scott directing, but it's got the cast is just insane. And so it feels like it's shooting you into the world of movies because from there you can branch off and see Brad Pitt, you got James Gandolfini, you got Christopher Walken, you got Dennis Hopper. So from that perspective, you could go and explore any of those actors' filmographies and just be into the world of film. And then there's also foreign cinema, if your kid's studying other languages like French. I remember loving Day for Night by Truffaut about filmmaking.
When were you exposed to that?
It was a movie my parents watched. So I watched it probably when I was 10 or 11 and it seemed like an adult movie, but there was a lot of funny stuff going on. And it was so interesting as a kid to see because it had a documentary feel like Truffaut is playing the director of a movie. My parents would point out that's the director. He directed the movie, but he's directing a movie in the movie. And that type of thing, it's kind of magical. It feels amazed that somebody would have ever attempted such a meta thing. So I think that's exciting. When you're older, that sort of thing could be seen as a gimmick. It might even turn you off. I don't want to watch a movie about a director making a movie. But as 10, 11, 12, it's titillating.
I guess you could read well enough at 10 or 11 to read subtitles.
Yeah, and if you watch it with your parents, there's a kind of it's exciting to be invited into the adult world. It's exciting to steal away and see stuff on your own. Basic Instinct is a crazy movie to watch on your own, but you wouldn't want to watch it with your parents.
It'd be very uncomfortable.
Right, but Day for Night, I think is like, you're like, oh, it's a little sophisticated French movie. From now, it would be even so much older to a new generation of kids. But even in the 90s, I could tell that was a different time period.
It's interesting because it also shows you what filmmaking can do. You knew that there was a director. You were introduced to that idea through that film.
And you see how the drama off the set affects how cast and crew. And it's just fun because in movies like that, to see the clips of the movie that they're filming, you get so implicated in it in a way. It's kind of theater because it's just showing you that the audience is a part of the story. So that's also exciting. You're not just watching characters. You're watching it, but they're telling you that this is how it's being made for you. So it has an educational element that empowers you as the viewer, essentially.
Thinking at a certain age, for one of his birthdays, I'm going to do a movie theater birthday and like pick the film and like put him in the theater and give him that experience with his friend.
Yeah. I think for me, that movie will either be Dark Crystal or Labyrinth. I don't know. Like, I should discuss that with my wife, but I know what you mean. Like, I'm definitely thinking about that type of thing. Like, what's going to be movie theater movie day event.
If that feels like a Dark Crystal, that was like 7 or 8, right? What? Let me look. There's a site called Common Sense Media that gives you a reference. They're saying age 10. So like 8.
Dark Crystal.
And then parents and kids say age 9.
That's great. That is great. Well, her go-to age for anything that she's scared of watching now, she's like, I'll watch it when I'm 20.
That's really cute.
So, I've tried to watch this movie with various people over the years. It's not for everyone. And like my wife didn't really want to watch it. And when Noelle brings the Dark Crystal book to the breakfast table and she's looking through it and talking about it, my wife turns to me and she's like, "Old about this, aren't you? Are you really happy right now?" I'm like, yeah, but it's a good movie. It's going to be fun for her to watch it.
Yeah, it's something that the two of you can have together.
Right, yeah.
This has been so fun talking to you.
Yeah, it's great. We should talk more.
I know.
But congratulations. This is such a cool podcast. I love that you're doing it, and I can't wait to hear the other episodes.
Thank you so much. If you enjoyed the conversation, please don't forget to like and subscribe. New episodes release every Wednesday. And leave a comment and let me know which movie you think I should show my son. Until next time, take care.